Hello, I'm Flora, and this is my fourth time on YouTube sharing with you events that I witnessed during my 96 years that I think have direct implications for the crisis our nation is right now. Yeah, I want to think back to the year 1938 to 1939, which was life-changing for me in many, many ways. My father, who was a historian, was invited to teach in England for a year. And the whole family went over. We sailed on September 21, 1938, right through one of the worst hurricanes ever to hit this country that devastated the northeast coast of the United States and killed hundreds of people. And we landed in England a week later, facing a hurricane of another kind. And that was the day that Chamberlain, the leader there in Britain, made a compromise with Adolf Hitler that Hitler could annex the western part of Czechoslovakia and bought a year of so-called peace for Europe. I say so-called because all the nations were madly arming. Everyone knew that war was coming. I still remember that year of preparation, the smell of the gas masks we tried on in school, the blackouts at night, the sandbags in the streets, the barbed wire. And along with glorious experiences we were having of art and scenery, we also heard on the radio the mad, screaming voice of Hitler and experienced firsthand the cruel iron boot of Mussolini in Italy. And we children, my sisters and I, were confused, troubled, conflicted, all the wonderful things we were seeing and doing, and this vast, menacing tidal wave of war hovering over all of Europe. And our parents were very frank with us. They didn't try to hide anything from us. They explained what was going on in ways that would keep us calm and centered, but also aware. And my father particularly, I remember him discussing what does a despot have to do to control his or her nation, as well as other nations he might want to annex or conquer. First of all, of course, get control of the media, which was simpler to do in those days without internet, computers, cell phones. Because if you get control of the media, you can decide what news you choose to air and how to speak about it, and also what news to choose not to air. It's a powerful control. Secondly, persecute the former political leaders of either your nation or the nation you're trying to take over. Prosecute them as traitors. If possible, lock them up. Familiar words, aren't they? Then, of course, he said, get hold of the universities and the schools. So you, the despot, can decide what faculty should be hired. Do they fit in with our agenda? Can decide what and what not can be taught in the classroom. A powerful control there. But he said the most important, if you really want to break the back of the resistance, go for the judges, go for the courts, go for the lawyers. Because once you have control of the law, then the resistance has no legal standing whatever, because the courts can decide what is a crime and what isn't. So at one fell swoop, any resistance becomes a criminal act. Among the Nazis, for example, not everyone knows that even before the mass killings of the Jews began, all the Jews in Germany were deprived of their citizenship. Even though their families may have lived in Germany for hundreds of years, fought in their wars, loyal citizens, now no longer citizens. And any honest judges or legislators in Germany who resisted or protested would be, of course, arrested, imprisoned, and interned, at the least. You know, our nation went through something like this back in the 1850s, when our Supreme Court passed the infamous Dred Scott decision, in which it was decided that escaping slaves from slaveholding states, even if they reached the non-slaveholding states where it was illegal to have slaves, the slave owners could come and drag them bodily out of the states where they'd taken refuge, drag them out of the courts, drag them out of the churches during services. And this actually happened many times over. And any brave judges, political leaders, pastors who resisted this were themselves arrested. Even though the non-slave states looked on the African American as a person with rights, the slave states looked on them as property and were given the legal right to take them back. I'm very proud to say that one of my great-grandfathers helped some of those slaves escape over the Missouri River and helped send them on their way to Canada, for they were not safe even in free territory. Yes, it happened. Now, how does one go after the legal system? I remember my father analyzing it. Of course, first of all, you ignore whatever the court is deciding if it goes against your agenda. As our president is ignoring both the federal court and the Supreme Court, saying you sent an innocent man that you've admitted was innocent to an infamous prison in El Salvador. Do everything you can to get him back. At the point of this videotaping, I have not seen any finger is lifted to get him back. It was, to quote, an administrative error. Oops, too bad, too late now to do anything about it. All right, a further step. If courts remain rebellious, intransigent, the next step is to intimidate them. That's already happening. Several law firms have already been intimidated by our present administration, by the federal government saying to these law firms, if you hire or keep on lawyers who do not fit in with our ideology, we will forbid them, we the federal government, for entering federal buildings, including federal courts, as lawyers. There's a pushback on that, I'm glad to say, but already several firms have agreed to compromise with the administration at this point. All right, further steps. I know of at least 2 judges who have been arrested for trying overtly to protect immigrants from being scooped up and deported before they've had their day in court. These judges have seen, as we all have far too often, the brutal process on the streets and even in the court buildings. They've seen, as we all have, the administrative errors I just talked about. For example, one of these, if it was an administrative error, a man whose family had been in this nation for 100 years as immigrants and citizens, he's a citizen, received a letter the other day saying, "Your time here is up. Leave the United States." And he is a citizen, and his family has been citizens for 100 years. Too many errors like that. And these judges are seeing these things happen. What if that man had been scooped up on the street before he could prove he was a citizen? Would anyone have listened to him? The Attorney General this past week said to these judges, "You are deranged. We will come after you, and we will persecute you." Quite so. I saw this in other nations 87 years ago. Saw it with my own eyes, heard it with my own ears. But I've become complacent, like so many of us, with all the wonderful changes in our nation since the Second World War, even beginning before that with Social Security. There have been so many wonderful changes in rights, racial, gender, voting rights, Medicare, marvelous changes to celebrate, that I became complacent in spite of what I saw as a 10-year-old. And thought, well, nothing can stop us now. Progress onwards and upwards forever. Perhaps the only good thing that will come out of this menacing mess of this administration is that now we begin to feel the real bite of despotism, the actual bites. We begin to feel how it feels in our own body, our own communities. And maybe we will recognize its signs, its face, its power, in time to stop it before it's too late. Well, thank you so much for listening. I'll be back with you next week, speaking out again, as so many of you are doing in your own way. Bye now. See you then.